Buying
you a
followers.
10, 9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna call the ad.
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. This episode is a Gather Geeks special sponsor edition. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
Welcome to this special edition of Gather Geeks. Today our story is about how Leo Events, the marketing and events agency, used the time during COVID to hold a mirror up to the entire organization and figure out how not only to serve their Fortune 500 clients, but better serve all their stakeholders. They viewed the virus and the equity movement as two major asteroids that impacted the event business like nothing ever in our history, and both had to be addressed by facing reality. They discovered that their leadership style had to be tweaked, that they had to listen more consciously to everybody, that they needed to treat diversity and inclusion more seriously, and they needed to use their event thinking skills to be more nimble. And they had to bring on talent that emphasized even more reliance on strong strategy as the driving force for all decision making. The story is really about how these frank and open discussions resulted in products that were more transformational than ever, and a workforce that felt more connected and empowered. Our guests are Leo Event Principal Cindy Brewer, Senior Vice President of Strategy Michael Dalton, whose first day on the job, by the way, was the beginning of the lockdown, and the event manager, John Brown, who led the equity inclusion initiatives at the firm. So if you're listening and you want to find out more about how Leo Events face the challenges of the moment, just take a look at the show notes. So let's take a listen. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, David.
Michael, how are you?
Excellent. Thanks, David.
Good. And John, welcome to the Gather Geeks podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you, David.
So let's get right into it. Michael, you are relatively new to the firm, but you've come in with some interesting new thinking about how you had the misfortune or fortune of coming in during probably one of the most challenging times in a business. And you're coming in with fresh eyes. What did you see and what advice are you going to be able to give to other people who are listening on how you face those kind of challenges?
Well, I think we're all facing all kinds of challenges, and certainly my situation is unique to me. But for the benefit of this episode, I think yes, I joined Leo Events in a time when we were all blissfully unaware that these giant asteroids would be hitting our industry this year. I joined Leo in March, which turned out to be right about when everybody went into lockdown and we began to understand how serious the pandemic was going to be. And so I think that we all had different expectations for how 2020 would unfold, and all of those were wiped out. Shortly followed by our production calendar, which was also wiped out industry-wide. And so the opportunity and the expectations of what I would bring to Leo Events certainly changed, but really the entire agency and indeed the entire industry found ourselves under a kind of pressure that we've never seen before. And in that sense, my experience was not unique to myself.
But what was it like? What did it feel like? Like, I believe that we're all about Maya Angelou. There's something that you're a new employee, you come in, like, what did you think? I mean, you had a family, you have everything else. I mean, how's the whole thing's falling apart? Take us into sort of your mindset.
Well, first and foremost, I felt that I came here to make a difference, and I was going to keep doing that. That was the intention. That was the plan. I joined Leo Events with great enthusiasm and excitement. It very clearly felt like the right place for me, and I was welcomed in kind. And I think we all saw this as an opportunity to make an even bigger change and to strengthen the agency in different ways than we anticipated. And so I was determined, I think was my very first reaction, followed quickly by the appropriate amount of gratitude, because my friends and colleagues and incredibly talented people across the industry immediately found their security yanked out from underneath them. And I was fortunate to have started a new job with an organization that had the right values and the right financial fortitude to weather that initial storm and take some time that was necessary to restructure the organization and make sure that we were strong enough to create a new path for ourselves.
So how many days were you there before you had to not see anybody again?
Well, my joke over the last few months is I can't wait for my new colleagues to find out that I'm tall. Because,
have you met them yet?
A handful, but my first day at Leo was on March 23rd, and that was right around when everybody was first locking down and staying home. So the vast majority of my time at Leo events has been from behind my desk at home.
So Cindy, we've known each other for a long time.
Yes.
You got a first class operation. You went through all of the great sort of ways of consolidating your companies and your past and different people and some of the best clients in the world. What did you think, and what went through your mind, the minds of you guys, about how to keep this thing going we're also doing this as sort of a peek over the fence to see how an agency really can survive and work and thrive, so other people can learn from this.
Right.
What went through your guys' minds when you had started this crisis?
Well, we were on track to have the best year that we've had in, ever with the history of Leo events with 2020. And our first quarter was just fantastic. And everybody had a great momentum and a great spirit. And we had actually in March, we were loading in for a Walmart show when, the lights went out. So we had to stop that.
Right in the middle of the show, like literally?
Load in, yes. We had loaded in a couple of days prior to. So it was, it was time to call it quits. And we understand and appreciate that and knew it was the right decision for everybody involved. But from that point forward, it was kind of interesting, David. We had 60 full-time employees, right? But we have 200 plus independent contractors and freelancers and vendors and vendor partners that we work with all over the world. And, to kind of have that shock of March as a business owner was enough to know that going into April, that kind of, you couldn't let the grief last too long as an owner of a company. And you had to find a way that you could express that to your employees that we're all in a state of shock and we're all in a state of grief. And we all have a right to be angry about what all has happened. But the only way we're going to survive this is to survive it together, to pull ourselves up from our bootstraps, stop acting like it's an eternal snow day, and let's get back to work. And that's really kind of the message that we as owners and senior leadership started expressing early in April, that, it's the fight or flight. And I've heard a good friend of mine say this before, where the people that were fighting were the ones out there that continue to push forward, and the people that were in flight were the ones catching up on Netflix. And we weren't going to be that company. So that was kind of the progress of how we kept saying, what can we do? How can we swivel? How can we create new product that we haven't had? What are some avenues that we can work toward?
But do you think that because we're in the event industry, you have that in your DNA to be flexible? Do you think that it helped the way you think? Because
Absolutely.
You get thrown curveballs all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what makes our industry so awesome, is the fact that we all are really great at the word pivot, because it comes at us in pre-production, it comes at us in production, and it comes at us at the end. So we're all used to it. It's just how we do it and how we take it in stride and how we do it with class and make it work.
Well, our pivot is now called Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, Plan E. So we've been pivoting forever.
Right.
So there's not a lot but so take us through the psychology of what you did to, as leaders, keep your employees on the right track, and what physical actions did you do? How did you sort of, as a case study to others?
Right.
Because we can't forget this ever.
Ever.
I was thinking that I had a conversation this morning that if we knew about the 1917-18 flu and had a memory of it, we would know more what to do. But I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
So that's the purpose of memorialization, the purpose of marking time with different things. and not forgetting stuff?
So for us, the journey after that kind of April, all staff meeting that we said, we're all in this together and we're going to do everything we can to work together to make this happen. Financially, fiscally, we pointed out some things that here are ways you can help save the company money. Here's the ways that we want you to be innovative. And everybody came together with great ideas. In fact, some that we've implemented now as new product. But there were still many employees still in a grief phase. And so you could see how the team was trying to adjust to help those people along, and or everybody that had children at home and schooling. I mean, there was a lot of everybody pulling together to help each other, which was great. But then, as we like to say, the lights went out again the end of May with the murder of George Floyd. And we really had to stop and realize that in addition to everything else going on, that we had employees that were suffering and suffering greatly. And to recognize that, we're fortunate that one of our clients and dear friends forever is the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. And the CMO, Faith Morris, and I have been friends for a long time. And I picked up the phone and I called her and I'm like, what do I do? I don't have the answers. I know we're not doing a great job, but help me along. And she gave some guidance. And the next call I made, I think was like 8:00 at night, was I called John Brown, one of our longstanding 4-year employees. And I was like, all right, I may screw this up. I just want you to have some grace with me, but tell me what I can do to help and what do you need? And so that seemed to be the next phase. I don't know, John, you want to?
John, you want to comment on what that call felt like? And did you feel like the company was reacting properly?
Sure. It was really important because those conversations in regards to what your company was doing socially or what their response was going to be was happening all around the country. And I could even say, even with my friends and my family, I mean, it was just a conversation that was so heavy constantly. So to get that call, I think from Cindy was very relieving, knowing that, hey, we may not have a plan, but we do want to do something. And I think the thing that I like that we did is that we did not rush into anything, right? Like we really took our time, got the right team together, put some processes in order, and really were very thoughtful about the steps that we did. And for me, it made it feel very much more genuine than just putting out a statement and then being done. And I think for me, because I can only speak from my perspective, it just made it feel like you were in the right spot.
So what were those steps? What were those steps? What were those concrete steps that you guys did?
Well, I think one of the first things was just to have the conversation, right? Like the call was the first thing. And so we did put together a small DEI team, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the first things we did was we put, at least internally, was to put together a survey to survey our internal full-time team. And not only that, but also our freelancers and our part-timers, because we wanted to get a feel for where they were at this time, so we could move forward and address things appropriately and properly, and to make sure we're actually doing things that were going to make a difference and a change. So that was one of the first things we did. And when we got that information back, it's obviously one of the hardest things to do when you get feedback is now what are you going to do with it?
What did they say?
So we got a lot of different feedback. I think one of the big things was they wanted more education about DEI. A lot of people have heard the terms, and now it's a hot term now, but they really wanted to know and understand what that meant, right? So a lot of times when we think of diversity, equity, inclusion, we think of ethnicity first, right? But there's a whole larger demographic in there. You've got the LGBTQ community, you have veterans, you've got women-owned businesses, small businesses. There's such a huge diversity inside of that. So just more education on that in general was one of the things they really asked for. And another thing they really asked for, which was one of our goals that we put down, was to work with more diverse vendors, right? And so part of that was, hey, we had to look in the mirror and figure out on our vendor list, how much or where was the diversity at? And I think that was one of the things I can say I'm really proud of as us as a company had to do was just to look in the mirror. And we saw some things we didn't like, but that doesn't mean we were bad, right? That just means we know we needed to make some improvements. And so that's been really exciting to kind of go through that process.
Yep. John's done a great job.
And Michael, let me ask you a question as, strategy and creativity and all that kind of things. It seems to me that it's kind of selfish to want equity and inclusion because you get much better ideas and much better output. It just, things are always just better. Do you find that? I mean, it seems like this is like an advantage to everybody that practices this.
I think we're learning that, and it doesn't take long to find data to support that claim that diversity is good for people, but it's also good for business, and it's a very easy benefit to understand when you read up on it a little bit. And it shouldn't be the motivation, but there is a practical value to it as well. And I think the big lesson for us has been that the pandemic and the social unrest and injustice that we've observed have combined to give us all an opportunity to look inward in a way that we wouldn't have if we were moving at the normal pace. 2020 was going to be the best year ever. We were at the peak of our powers. There was a lot of money in the industry. Everybody was happily working a million miles an hour, and then all of a sudden we're ground down to a halt. And what does that mean? And we have, I think, as an industry, always been pretty sensitive and pretty progressive in terms of making our audiences feel connected and transmitting a sense of belonging at our events. It's a priority, but I don't know that we had asked ourselves if we were doing that in our own shop. And it's been a refreshing opportunity to look inward and work on ourselves a little bit as we shift the way that we do business and how we serve our clients.
So when you say work on yourselves, I've done therapy. Many of you may have done therapy. What does a brainstormer really look like when you're including everybody? How do you do it? I mean, I've studied all these people that study social physics and things like that, how ideas flow. And it's usually when the guy running the meeting shuts up and doesn't say anything. But how do you actually listen to people? I mean, the people want to be heard. And how do you actually practice that in reality?
That's where honestly, that's one of the things that came out of this DEI initiative, is that we are not diverse enough as an organization to listen effectively. And again, it's not a negative. It's something that we're learning as we work together, that we need more diversity in order to allow the listening to evolve. Because when you have a lot of people that look alike and think alike and grew up alike, or whatever that it is, you all seem to think the same things. So you do not want to throw out a new idea or throw out some other idea because it's just not your experience or your background. Where we've been fortunate over the past 2 years to really start to expand what our internal group looks like. And those ideas have started to infiltrate into what we do every day. And we only want that to continue. But that's for sure. It's a perfect question to ask. And I think we're all in the same boat, that listening is by far the most important thing that we can do right now. And then to figure out how to let those voices expand.
But how do you listen? I don't think I can answer this question myself. How do you listen appropriately? What is the technique? Some people have different brainstorming styles. Like I use this thing called synectic style of brainstorming. How do you actually how do you operate a meeting to let people listen and hear and talk? Maybe John, you can sort of say how you've seen that change in the company or in general, because you have to take it seriously that these are different voices too.
Yeah, I think it 100% starts with having really fantastic leaders. So I think we're lucky to have that at Leo. But I think it causes a huge introspective and a lot of transparency, to be vulnerable, to realize just because you got something wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means we need to pause and pivot and do something a little bit different. And I can say from our principals to our executive team and everyone we had in that meeting, it was just a lot of listening and giving each other grace, because you also don't know what you don't know. And I think the relationship that I've been able to build with Cindy and the rest of the team over the years has allowed us to have some of that transparency and allow each other to have a certain amount of grace that you may not necessarily always have when the right people aren't in the room. So I think that's been really important.
So Cindy, is it hard to have that grace and to transition into that and to be able to change how your leadership style changes?
There have been so many clients that I have come into John's office and said, John, I need you to sit down with me, and I need you to help me understand what I need to hear so that I can help and guide this client or whomever best. And that's been that's what you have to do if you don't know how to manage it, right? You talked about earlier about Michael coming in at the right time. Michael, because we listened, because we were learning as much as everybody else was in this, Michael was instrumental in telling us, don't be part of the noise right now. Let's take a breath. Let's not rush into anything. Let's listen to what everybody's doing out there before we determine exactly what it is and how we want to position ourselves. So that strategy part was key for us.
I would add to that real leadership starts with listening. And people don't feel heard if they know that the person that they're talking to is just waiting for their turn to talk. And I think another layer to that, you ask how we conduct meetings and how we make sure that we're listening in these circumstances. Another layer to that, which needs to get its due, is the fact that all of a sudden everything was virtual. And that's not only how we do our day-to-day business, but how we produce events. And so virtual had dual meaning for us, because all of a sudden a company that has offices in 3 cities in Tennessee and is very much a face-to-face, in-person fueled agency, all of a sudden it has a dispersed workforce during a crisis that is continuing to unfold. And so all of those pressures were compounded by the fact that we were communicating in a medium that was brand new in terms of day-to-day. Now, those of us in this industry are used to taking calls on airplanes and running through airports and being in the convention hall backstage and tuning out the noise in order to attend a meeting. So we know how to get things done in those circumstances, but communicating differently under that kind of pressure had its own learning curve as well. And I think that breathing through it and taking time and triple guessing our motives every step of the way has been a quiet strategy that we've employed across the organization that I think has enabled us to navigate some pretty choppy waters culturally.
So with all that said now, let's move into what's next. You say third quarter is going to be really important to what's going on in the world. Everybody wants to know what's next, what's up, like where are we? Michael, what do you seek? Open your crystal ball. You have some real hard information because you have clients that want to do stuff. Where are we? Where are we going?
Where we are right now, and we have the benefit of hindsight, of course, but where we are right now is that organizations have continued to remember or have realized that they can't be quiet, that the need for people to gather and connect and communicate will persist regardless of the circumstances. And although many companies in the Fortune 500 and other organizations can sit out a season, and I think that we all understood that maybe we shut it down in the spring and summer as a society, that life would be disrupted, that we have to find new ways to move forward. And with that persistent need for people to get together, and with the need for organizations to communicate to employees and to one another and to make people feel like they're connected and give people a common purpose, virtual events now are having their moments. Whatever a virtual event was before spring of 2020, it's an entirely different thing now. And so right now, organizations may have had a quiet second quarter, but now they're coming roaring back to life. And it looks different and it sounds different, and the business models are different and all of that. But because we consciously stayed out of the shouting match in the late spring and early summer and refined our offerings and made sure that our capabilities would be able to stand up to the promises that we were so eager to make to our clients, we were able to prove to our clients that we currently had in our portfolio that we were ready to help them, and also go out and look for new ones. And we've been fortunate enough to fill up our calendar in Q3 and well into Q4 with a slew of virtual events of various sizes and shapes. So in terms of where we are, we're busy. We don't take it for granted. We are learning every day. And I think we as an industry, in a way, David, your audience and everybody that might be listening to this recording understands that our industry will never be the same.
So what are these? What have you learned? What are some of the thinking in terms of when you talk about attention span and things like that? Do you have any sort of hard and fast, like nothing should be longer than X minutes? Or is there any sort of things that oh, this is not going to work because these people are going to be cleaning their desk in 5 seconds?
We do. We don't have the 10 rules that are steadfast that we never violate no matter what, because every client is different, every production's different, and every couple of weeks the shape of our industry seems like it's
Oh, yeah.
different. But I'll tell you this, David. I've been creating content for a long time, and I never regret making it shorter. And I think that is a pretty maybe obvious rule for the road, but brevity is king because time is so valuable. And I think that applies to typical things like presentations, but also just the time you're asking somebody to be in front of a screen. And that may be an obvious one to your listeners, but that's one that we should never forget. Some other rules is that unlike a ballroom or a typical an event or an arena or any other way that people have gathered physically, in this case, you can't really assume that the audience is receiving the information that in the way that you're imagining it. When they're in the seats in the audience, or when they're networking at an event, or when they're elbow to elbow at a trade show, you know how they're being you know how your event is being experienced. In this case, somebody could be out in their car because their house is too loud, or they could have sick relatives 3 doors down, or any other number of circumstances could be impacting the emotions and the attention and the focus that they're able to give to the experience that you're offering. So on demand content for practical reasons is really important. And yet we also at the same time tout the value of live experience. So there is still value in creating something that only happens once and gives people the satisfaction and the sense of urgency that what's being transmitted is valuable and will be useful to them in their profession. So it's about balancing all of these new and different variables that in a live physical event, we have the luxury of seeing with our own eyes the entire time and controlling more specifically.
Have you sort of come up with any sort of thoughts on the different types of events? Like when does a formal presentation work well? When does this casual conversations like we're having now make bigger impact? I mean, there's different formulas for different things. Have you sort of adjusted your formulas in any way? And I like this informalness, which I think people want to be breaking the fourth wall a lot.
Yes, and I think we found that varies from client to client, and our clients have different needs and expectations. I think the universal rule, or the common theme that we're hearing is that the formality is easy to dismiss. Nobody's as worried about perfect audio and video. Nobody's as worried about hair and makeup or their wardrobe, and people forgive some of the production perfection that we normally seek due to these circumstances. But it varies client to client in terms of what formats work. For example, our work for AutoZone has been unique because this is a client that Leo has known very, very well for years and served successfully in very specific ways. And all of a sudden, the pandemic creates a new kind of meeting that they need to have first with their vendors and then with their national sales meeting this fall. And they were one of the first to say that the formality is less of an issue than ever before. Let's focus on what's important. Let's make sure that people feel welcomed and feel connected. Let's not let some of the red tape or some of the processes that get in the way sometimes be an obstacle in the events that we're producing. Some organizations, it's still one-way traffic in terms of we have information that we need to communicate out. So we're going to be doing scripted presentations that are pre-recorded. And that's not because there's anything inauthentic about them, but because that's how they are most accurate and most efficient. And that becomes a valuable way for people to communicate. Then on the other side of that, we produce entertainment for Walmart a couple times already. And what that need is a much more casual, that we want to make sure that there's still fun and spontaneity and entertainment woven into the experiences that we're creating. What we've done at Leo and what we're proposing for some other programs that are on the docket is a way to shake up traditional formats. How do you architect a panel in a different way than people have seen on stage or on screen? How do you surprise people in a good way, not disrupt the convention just for the sake of doing so? But it really does begin with what the client's communications imperatives are and the tone and the style of the experience that they want to create.
Can you give any examples of how you disrupted the panel? I would love to hear that one.
one example that we're really excited about in the digital space, it gives us the opportunity. We're freed up from the physical requirements of staging a panel in a traditional format, right? We don't have to move chairs on stage. We don't have to get people ready backstage. We can compose our panel with more people because we don't even have to bring them all to a single location. So at a glance, people say, oh, every single panel at any event is just like any other Zoom call. And so we immediately challenged ourselves to say, well, how can we change that up? And we have created an approach that we are fondly calling the perfect panel, which is a way of programming a panel of different participants for each individual question or topic, rather than assembling a panel and saying, here's your 4 experts, and they're going to talk for 45 minutes. We're going to shuffle the members of that panel every couple of minutes based on the question and the topic at hand, so that you have the right people answering the right questions at the right time. So rather than bringing 4 people to stage for 45 minutes, we bring 12 or 16 people who will participate at the appropriate time during that same amount of stage time, but it's on screen.
You guys are dealing with Fortune 500 companies at the highest level. And so the fact is the trust is there, and that's critical to keeping it going.
Well, we've been fortunate to have the trust of a lot of our legacy clients, and we're doing programs with brands that are very familiar to Leo already: AutoZone and Acquia, Walmart, Nissan, and Sherwin-Williams are all on our calendar in the next 6 months, and they each have a different need, and they each have a different tolerance for creative risk. So I can't reveal too many secrets about what will unfold. But our first responsibility is to those brands and their messages, and to preserve the integrity of the experience that is essential. And the very next is when we start to have fun and tweak the format a little bit. But I will say that what's great about virtual events, and we all have our complaints, and we're grateful to be producing them at all, I think is fair to say, is how unexpected the format can be. We have produced shows that last 45 minutes, and that's the whole project. And we're also working on 3, 4, 5-day events that unfold agenda-wise like a traditional physical event would, for 10,000 plus attendees who arrive with business objectives and real needs and expectations. And I think the creative opportunity is not how do you replicate the things that you physically can't do anymore, but how do you replace those sentiments and those little moments of joy and collaboration. I think recognition is an untapped area for creative exploration, because that is one of the places where there's an appetite from the audience to have their moment in the spotlight. So one of the techniques that we're using is to make sure that if you have a business session in a traditional corporate event, there might be a little bit of sentiment in the audience that it's, well, okay, what do I have to do today? I have to go to these sessions. I have to spend some time at the trade show. And that doesn't mean that it's a burden, but it is work. And when you come to awards and recognition and networking events and entertainment events, that's the fun. That's the play part of it. So it's not what do I have to do, it's what do I get to do? And we want to answer that question. We want to invite the audience to be active participants as much as possible, even if they're at a distance.
When you're pacing these kind of events, have you come up with sort of the ebb and flows of the emotions and things like that? That is sort of, there's a formula around, or is it, if you go straight, a 3-day event, sort of like on the face of it, you think, oh my God, how am I going to do that? How have you sort of thought about the pacing of things?
We've thought about it like this, and that's a great question, David, because I think in a traditional physical event, in what we might someday call the old days, we didn't mind exhausting our audience. You kind of wanted them to get on the plane and go home and be tired and have full brains and need time to process everything that we threw at them for every minute that they were on site, wherever we brought them together. Here, the last thing you want is your audience to feel exhausted. You want them to feel fulfilled and informed and connected in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have been but we really need to be mindful of capacity. And that sometimes, like I said, can be part of the duration of things, but it's also, to your point, how you program the agenda. And we have this notion of something that we call internally, and we're beginning to send it out externally as well, called breathing room, which is for every 40 minutes or so that you spend focused and connected, the rest of that hour, the balance of that hour, should be time for you to take a breath. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily check out of the event or walk away from your desk, although it certainly can. But the idea that there is space between these big commitments of time and energy and focus is absolutely critical. And that's right at the top of our list.
What do these breathing moments look like?
Well, breathing room can mean all sorts of things. Breathing room can just be time to yourself, to go make a cup of coffee and walk away from the desk for a few minutes, or it can be event programming like any other. We can partner with a yoga instructor who, let's say a session takes 48 minutes of an hour and we've allocated an hour for it. Well, then you've got 12 minutes left. And we're all familiar on conference calls of people saying, I'll give you this time back. And what we're doing is giving that time back, but we're also programming that time. So if you want to stand up at your desk and do some breathing exercises or otherwise be engaged with a little bit of programming that is spontaneous and different and not directly tied to the business agenda at hand, we want to provide that for people. And that could be a cool video or a photo montage or an opportunity for people to get involved in a moderated chat. We don't have to reinvent it every time, but we can also just put up a pretty graphic.
This goes back to the equity part, right? None of us know what is going on in each other's homes, but everybody has some type of obligation in their home. And so whether it's children in their home, whether it's elderly parents that you're taking care of, whether it's just having to get up and stretch your legs because you got to do that for health reasons, that breathing room allows anybody to decide what they want to do with that time. And I do think that that's crucial in the difference right now of that pace that we said that, that you were talking about earlier in the live events and the pace that we were all in live events, that I do think the pace that you're seeing in these virtual events now will forever change how we operate live events in the future. Even industry conferences that I have been attending throughout the summer virtually, where I would take diligent notes and have great ideas. The second you get on that plane, you're catching up from being at a live show for 4 or 5 days. And all those notes just kind of go by the wayside until you have time to decompress them, where things are so happening now and in the moment and so informal and casual that you really feel like you can take those ideas with the little bit of breathing room that you have and implement them in some capacity or pass them on in a better format so that you can have quicker takeaways. It's been so interesting to watch.
I think that is really an interesting point. We're going back to kind of the beginning where we had to start with taking a break from the real world, and we're now programming it into our events, and we're taking time to actually take a beat and think about equity and attention spans and how we live our lives, because we have so many challenges that are going on in back of us in our rooms.
Correct.
So it really makes a lot of sense.
And Michael and I've had some conversations too about, evening events, right? Evening offsite events or hotel ballroom events. You had the opportunity, because you were away from everybody, to do what you needed to do at those events, to network, to sell, to learn, whatever it was. We don't have that luxury now with virtual events. So anybody that is doing an evening event has to think about time zones and has to think about the fact that their attendee has probably been on virtual all day, has not been able to pay attention to whomever is in their home. And by the time that you get to what would be dinner time, that's just another thing that's taking away from, mommy making dinner or daddy being able to help with something. So, we've been throwing out ideas with our clients about how you incorporate just that evening event to be family friendly. Instead of watching something on TV or a game, that the family themselves can experience whatever that evening event is, and it's appropriate for that. Because there's some key considerations in that.
It's interesting that also, and I know we're going to wrap up here in a second, but we're talking about how we're bringing everyone in for equity, and those groups form tribes. So how do you keep refreshing the ideas? Like, once we're all inclusive, we got to keep being inclusive. How do you do that? I mean, how do you sort of prevent yourself from getting stale? This is with creating events, with managing your teams. How do we take it? What's the next level up from what we're doing right now?
Oh, goodness. You're asking us for a crystal ball.
Well, that's a crystal ball question. And I don't know. And I don't think there is an answer to that.
Too much of making sure everybody is inclusive is not effective. And I agree with you about that, David. You will lose something if you make sure that it is 100% inclusive. And I don't think anybody, as much as everybody wants to try and wants to succeed at that, I think that's a hard achievable goal. And I would love to be that person, and we'd love to be that company. And John, I don't know if you want to throw something in there, but that's a lot.
I think from my perspective, I just think you want to have healthy equity, right? So for me, that means the right people are in the rooms, and you're allowing the right people to have opinions and give input to the right things. And I think as long as every once in a while, whether that's quarterly, whether that's, every half year, that you just look in the mirror and say, okay, how can we improve? And I think for us, that's been the biggest thing. Instead of looking at percentages of, hey, we want to be at this percentage, let's just look at how we can improve in certain areas. And to me, I think that breeds that healthy diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, all around the table that I think you at the end want to have.
It's no surprise that our industry has pulled together in these times of crisis. And our industry has always been this kind of elite league and a business where work sometimes feels like play. But now we're all partners in advocacy too, and we're all committed to making things better when we have an unfettered opportunity to be our best again. And we, at Leo and industry wide, we've been really moved by our industry's activism. Black Lives Matter, the Live Events Coalition, Go Live Together, Open to Work, Ready to Work, Red Alert. I mean, it's very clear to me that in a time of deep distress, we're leaning on each other. And that tells us at Leo that there's community within the industry. And I think we all need to explore the impact of these giant asteroids that have hit us this year and embrace the change that creates, because we'll be at our best when we use this crisis as a springboard to better in the future, and not a shelter that we hide underneath until things miraculously improve.
Well, that is a fabulous way to end. We covered a lot of territory. I learned a ton. I think our audience will have learned a ton. And you guys have been great role models for sharing this. Our whole idea at BizBash is to allow people to peek over the fence to see what other people are doing, because you don't know, because you don't get into someone else's event or someone else's company or somebody else's head. And I think now we're all, using this opportunity. From crisis comes opportunity, I guess, is what we're seeing.
Well, we all learn from you, David. We share all your nuggets of wisdom.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.